بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت لارتكاب قتل عمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفق المادة 12 أولا أليف بدلالة المادة 12
彼はこの法廷を芝居のように思っているのかもしれない。それも無理もない。この法廷の中でさっきまで自分の配下であった秘密警察の幹部や陸軍の将軍がいたからである。
We're hoping that he will be there today and that he will hear what he's pretending to ignore. The crimes, the corruption, the assassinations, the disappearances, the exile, the tortures. He will hear it all.
Most definitely, Your Honor. I did not and could not have committed these acts against the sister Republic of Sierra Leone. I think that this is an attempt to continue to divide and rule the people of Liberia and Sierra Leone, and so most definitely I'm not guilty.
This is Saddam Hussein, who was charged with crimes against humanity by the Iraqi Special Tribunal in Baghdad. Once the undisputed ruler of Iraq, his trial would have become a defining moment in international justice.
تفضل أستاذ. دخلوا هذا رامز كلار جاي يلا دخلوه. تفضل أستاذ.
For decades, Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with an iron fist, notorious for his brutal suppression of dissent, use of chemical weapons, and countless human rights violations. But his capture in December 2003 set the stage for one of history's most significant trials. On November 5, 2006, in a packed Baghdad courtroom, Saddam Hussein stood accused of crimes against humanity for the Dujail massacre. This event, which occurred in 1982, involved the execution of 148 Shiite villagers after an assassination attempt on Saddam's life. The court also considered his regime's widespread torture, forced displacement, and systematic oppression. The tension in the courtroom was unmistakable. The proceedings began with strict warnings from the presiding judge.
مسميه مطالعة. هو يسخر من نفسه. هو رجل محل سخرية. وطلعوا من القاعة. طلعوا من القاعة. طلعوا من القاعة.
From the very start, Saddam and his co-defendants made it clear they did not recognize the court's authority. As the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, the atmosphere grew increasingly charged.
ظل واقف. نتلو قرار الحكم. ظل واقف. نعم. واقف نتلو قرار الحكم. استمع إلى قرار المحكمة واقفا.
اسمع القرارات.
إيه واقفا. كن واقفا.
لا جاعد.
وقف. وقفوا.
جالس.
Saddam's refusal to stand for the verdict was met with a firm response.
يلا لا تطويل.
يلا جوزوا منا. جوزوا منا.
لا تطويل. حكي وياك.
قررت المحكمة.
The judge's words translated as,
"The court has decided to sentence the accused, Saddam Hussein al-Majid, to death by hanging until death for committing intentional murder as a crime against humanity."
الحكم على المدان صدام حسين المجيد بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت.
But even in this moment, Saddam remained defiant.
لارتكاب قتل عمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفق المادة 12 أولا أليف بدلالة المادة 12.
His voice echoed through the chamber, making it clear he would not go quietly. The court detailed the legal basis for his sentence, citing specific articles of Iraqi law.
رقم 10 لسنة 2005 وحددت العقوبة وفق أحكام المادة 406.
But the interruptions continued, with shouts of Allahu Akbar and other protests filling the air. As the judge listed additional sentences for crimes of forced displacement, Saddam interrupted with more defiant declarations.
نحن أهلها بالسجن 10 سنوات ارتكاب إبعاد السكان أو النقل القسري للسكان كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفق المادة
He just wouldn't stop.
كامل مادة
والموت لأعدائهم
142 من قانون العقوبات رقم 111 لسنة
والموت لأعدائهم
المعدل.
However, the sentencing extended to Saddam's closest associates. Barzan Ibrahim al-Hassan, Saddam's half-brother, received his own death sentence and responded with nationalist slogans. Another key figure, Awad Hamad al-Bandar, reacted to his death sentence with emotional outbursts.
بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت لارتكابه قتل العمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفقا لأحكام المادة 12 أولا أليف وبدلالة المادة 15 أولا ثانيا ثالثا.
Taha Yassin Ramadan received a life sentence, his reaction notably more subdued than his co-defendants.
قررت المحكمة الحكم على طه ياسين رمضان بالسجن مدى الحياة لارتكاب القتل العمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفق المادة 12 أولاً.
3 lower-ranking officials were sentenced to 15 years each, accepting their fate with calm resignation.
قررت المحكمة الحكم على كل من عبد الله كاظم رويد وعلي دايح علي ومزهر عبد الله كاظم بالسجن لمدة 15 سنة لارتكاب القتل العمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية.
As the judge pronounced the final sentences, the significance of the moment settled over the room.
تم رفع الجلسة.
The court was adjourned, and with the adjournment came the end of an era. Saddam Hussein got a harsh sentence for his crime against humanity. But what about a dictator caught fleeing from the kingdom he once ruled? This is Nicolae Ceausescu, former president of Romania, who was charged with genocide and economic sabotage alongside his wife Elena in Târgoviște, Romania.
ルーマニアの首都ブカレストに近いブルゴビシテで独裁者チャウシェスク大統領は捕らわれた。
After fleeing Bucharest as the revolution erupted in December 1989, the Ceausescus were captured near Târgoviște. Their downfall began with a brief medical examination, but the dictator's arrogance remained clear.
旧国戦線兵士たちによってチャウシェスクは近くの学校に連行された。医師から健康診断を受けるチャウシェスクは独裁者の常でこの事態が革命であることがまだ飲み込めていないようであった。彼が24年間
When officials attempted to examine Elena, she refused cooperation just as defiantly as her husband.
妻エレナは自分は健康だからと診断を拒否した。エレナとて夫と同じ思いだろう。この無礼な仕打ちに怒っているようだ。
The urgency of revolutionary justice meant the trial convened in a makeshift courtroom, a school classroom hastily converted for this historic moment. The charges were clear: genocide, destruction of state power, economic sabotage, and attempting to flee with state funds.
一つ、大統領就任後に6万人もの国民を虐殺したこと。二つ、国家権力を破壊したこと。三つ、公共の財産、建物、工業施設を破壊して国内を撹乱させたこと。四つ、国民経済を崩壊させたこと。
But Nicolae Ceausescu refused to acknowledge the court's authority, insisting he was still Romania's president.
チャウシェスクはこの特別軍事法廷そのものを認めないと激しく抗議する。どんな質問も拒否する。私は今もまだルーマニア大統領である。
He addressed the judges as if they were still his subordinates, claiming,
You still respect me.
たちは今も私を敬愛しているはずだ。 このことでお前たちはきっと後悔するぞ。
His final words to the court were a chilling warning.
You will regret this.
彼はこの法廷を芝居のように思っているのかもしれない。それも無理もない。この法廷の中でさっきまで自分の配下であった秘密警察の幹部や陸軍の将軍がいたからである。
The military tribunal, composed of senior officers, deliberated for only minutes before delivering the death sentence.
この特別軍事裁判は55分間で終わり、わずか5分で判決が出た。
Even after the verdict, Ceausescu continued to protest, refusing to acknowledge the court's authority.
この特別軍事裁判を認めていない。だから死刑判決も認めないと抗議した。しかし死刑判決は確実に執行されたのである。
The aftermath left the former dictator frustrated. Their unceremonious burial symbolized the revolution's desire to erase their legacy.
二人の棺はブカレスト北部のゲンチャ墓地に埋葬された。墓標を立てず、二度と蘇ることのないよう厳重に埋葬された。
Yet another dictator meets his tragic end. But what about a former dictator who was forced to be in court after violating his people in every way possible?
Brought in kicking and screaming, and it wasn't clear what would happen.
This is Hissene Habre, who was charged with crimes against humanity, torture, and war crimes in Dakar, Senegal. Once the brutal dictator of Chad, his reign left a trail of death, torture, and disappearing victims across the country from 1982 to 1990.
Brought in kicking and screaming, and it wasn't clear what would happen.
Pursuit of justice for Habre's victims began immediately after his fall, but it would take more than 25 years, relentless effort, and extraordinary determination to bring him to trial. Survivors, led by people like Slobodan Milosevic, spent decades gathering evidence, organizing, and pushing for his prosecution. On July 20th, 2015, the Extraordinary African Chambers convened in Dakar, Senegal, setting a historic precedent. The first time a former African head of state faced trial for human rights abuses in another African country. Habre, always defiant, refused to recognize the court's authority. The judge's warning was clear.
But the court very calmly said, Mr. Habre,
Que vous soyez consentant ou non, il a ordonné que vous soyez amené de force. Et en tous les cas, force reste à la loi.
Well, the trial revealed the full horror of Habre's regime. Witness after witness detailed systematic torture, slavery, and mass killings. The evidence was overwhelming. Police documents in Habre's own handwriting, lists of prisoners, and death certificates. The tension in the courtroom was impossible to ignore as survivors faced their tormentor.
Je me sens forte, très courageuse, parce que je suis devant l'homme qui est fort là. Avant au Tchad, qui vient s'asseoir maintenant, il ne parle même pas. Je suis vraiment fière.
One witness, Khadija Hassan Zidan, broke decades of silence to directly accuse Habre of sexual assault.
Quel président?
Former political police member Bandoum Banjim testified to Habre's direct role in prisoner fates.
Oui, il y a eu des PV qui sont adressés à son Excellence, Monsieur le Président Hissene Habre, et le directeur, il prenait ses fiches de l'audition, il les amenait à la présidence. Et une fois ces fiches sont annotées, sont revenues, et soit les personnes sont libérées, ou soit ils sont exécutés, torturés. Ça, je peux le confirmer.
The most damning evidence came from Habre's own security archives. Thousands of documents confirming his personal involvement in the atrocities.
Dans le bâtiment de la DDS, on s'est retrouvé devant des milliers et des milliers de documents qui étaient éparpillés sur le sol. Il y avait beaucoup de listes de prisonniers, prisonniers soit politiques, soit prisonniers de guerre. Il y avait beaucoup de certificats de décès.
As the trial progressed, the court heard from 93 witnesses and considered mountains of forensic evidence. The testimony painted a chilling portrait of systematic repression and state-sponsored terror. When the verdict day arrived, the courtroom was packed with survivors, their families, and human rights advocates from around the world. And then the judge began.
Hissene Habre, la Chambre vous déclare coupable. En application de l'article 10.2 du statut, des crimes contre l'humanité de viol, d'esclavage forcé, d'homicide volontaire, de pratiques massives et systématiques d'exécution sommaire, d'enlèvement de personnes suivies de leur disparition, de torture et d'actes inhumains visés aux articles 6A, B, F et G du statut. En conséquence, Hissene Habre, la Chambre vous condamne à la peine d'emprisonnement à perpétuité.
What did Hissene think of this? However, for his victims, the impact was immediate and overwhelming. Outside the court, Suleiman Nguema reflected on the bittersweet victory.
Mais ce qui me fait mal, j'ai beaucoup de collègues qui sont morts en chemin, ils n'ont pas pu voir ces résultats. C'est pourquoi j'étais ému et je pleurais, mais c'est une satisfaction totale.
Hissene Habre's conviction was more than just a legal victory. It set a powerful precedent for international justice, especially in Africa. For the first time, an African court held a former head of state accountable for crimes against humanity. But as the world applauded this landmark judgment, there was another dictator who thought he had done nothing wrong.
Most definitely, Your Honor. I did not and could not have committed these acts.
This is Charles Taylor, the former Liberian president who was charged with 11 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity in The Hague, Netherlands. The verdict against him marks a groundbreaking moment in international criminal justice.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, has lauded the ruling of the Special Court for Sierra Leone.
Taylor's story begins with his rise to power in Liberia and extends through his involvement in the brutal civil war in Sierra Leone. The charges against him included terrorizing civilians, murder, sexual slavery, conscripting child soldiers, and trafficking in blood diamonds. He was accused of supporting rebel groups in Sierra Leone, providing them with weapons and logistical support in exchange for diamonds, and fueling a war that claimed more than 120,000 lives. The courtroom became the stage for a 4-year trial that produced over 50,000 pages of testimony from witnesses who described unimaginable horrors.
Taylor was charged with 11 counts of war crimes, among other atrocities committed against civilians in neighboring Sierra Leone during the country's civil war in the 1990s, which he was accused of supporting, including the recruitment of child soldiers.
Throughout the trial, Taylor maintained his innocence, claiming that the proceedings were a political conspiracy aimed at dividing Liberia and Sierra Leone. When given the opportunity to address the court, he delivered a passionate denial.
Most definitely, Your Honor. I did not and could not have committed these acts against the sister Republic of Sierra Leone. I think that this is an attempt to continue to divide and rule the people of Liberia and Sierra Leone, and so most definitely I'm not guilty.
But the evidence was overwhelming. The court found Taylor guilty on all 11 counts, including murder, slavery, and conscripting child soldiers. The verdict was clear. Even former heads of state can be held accountable for their crimes under international law. Navi Pillay, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, emphasized the precedent set by Taylor's conviction. She stated,
In this case, it's the very first time that an international criminal tribunal has convicted a former head of state. Even the most powerful are accountable under international law.
As the verdict was delivered, Taylor maintained his composure, but his legacy was forever tarnished. The verdict brought a measure of justice to the victims of the Sierra Leone Civil War, who had waited so long for acknowledgement of their suffering.
Welcoming the judgment, Pile said it was an indication of justice for victims of war crimes who have for so long cried out for justice and never got it.
According to Navi Pillay, this is what Charles's sentence meant for dictators around the world.
Together with the case of Charles Taylor, other leaders have also been indicted. We know of former President Gbagbo, Laurent Gbagbo of Côte d'Ivoire, the late Muammar Gaddafi, and Radovan Karadzic is facing trial in the ICT war.
As Taylor was led away to serve his 50-year sentence, the international community took note. Justice may be slow, but it is relentless.
Welcoming the judgment, Pile said it was an indication of justice for victims of war crimes.
Charles Taylor will spend a significant amount of his remaining years on Earth behind bars. But what about a man whose reaction was a sharp contrast with his rule of terror? This is Francisco Macias Nguema, the former dictator of Equatorial Guinea, who was charged with multiple counts of mass murder, genocide, and crimes against humanity in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. The courtroom became a symbol of justice after years of fear. In the months following his overthrow on August 3, 1979, the streets of Malabo transformed from places of fear to scenes of military control and public hope. The public trial was held in a cinema, with loudspeakers broadcasting proceedings to the crowds outside. Nguema, once feared as an absolute ruler, now sat silent and beaten, gripping the arm of a guard for support. On September 24, 1979, Francisco Macias Nguema was formally charged with the brutal murder of thousands of his own citizens, the systematic destruction of intellectual and political opposition, and the total collapse of national institutions. The charges included genocide against his own people, the destruction of the educated class, and the establishment of a totalitarian regime that ruled through terror for over a decade. The capital city remained under tight military control. Soldiers patrolled the streets and manned checkpoints, ensuring security as the country confronted its brutal past. The trial venue, Sina Marfil, had seen better days as a movie theater, but now served as the site of historic justice. Inside the cinema, the audience included citizens, soldiers, and officials, all eager to witness the fall of the man who had ruled through terror. The scenes inside the courtroom seemed impossible. Nguema, once untouchable, now appeared vulnerable and resigned to his fate. The proceedings began with formal announcements of the charges against him. The court official stated clearly. Nguema listened in silence as the charges were read. Genocide, mass murder, destruction of national institutions, and crimes against humanity. The trial was broadcast throughout the capital, with crowds gathering outside to listen. Speakers played the proceedings while people lined the streets, eager to witness justice. For Nguema, there was no bravado left. He sat very solemn, rarely meeting anyone's gaze. The charges detailed how he had systematically targeted the educated class, destroyed national institutions, and created a climate of fear that paralyzed an entire country. Evidence presented showed the destruction of schools, hospitals, and civil society. Witnesses described how Nguema had personally ordered executions, overseen torture chambers, and presided over a reign of terror that left thousands dead and many more traumatized. The public watched and listened as Nguema's fate was decided. The verdict was inevitable. After reviewing overwhelming evidence and witness testimony, the special tribunal found Francisco Macias Nguema guilty of genocide, mass murder, and crimes against humanity. The sentence was swift and severe: death by firing squad. The country, once ruled by fear, now stood united in justice. Public reaction was solemn but relieved, but Nguema still had the same subdued composure. Nguema met his end at the hands of justice. But what about Slobodan, who escaped punishment?
As you know full well, I would reject such ideas.
Is Slobodan Milosevic, who faced charges of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity at The Hague, Netherlands. His trial would become the longest and most complex war crimes case since Nuremberg.
Kosovo is the territory of one state. Kosovo, being what it is, has been what it is since the London Peace Agreement in 1913, not to mention centuries ago.
The story begins in the 1990s as Yugoslavia fractures violently along ethnic lines. Milosevic, Serbia's strongman, rose from a bureaucrat to become the face of aggressive Serbian nationalism. He orchestrated campaigns that left hundreds of thousands dead, millions displaced, and entire communities destroyed across Bosnia, Croatia, and Kosovo. The world watched in horror as ethnic cleansing unfolded on European soil. But international justice had evolved since World War II. On June 28, 2001, Milosevic became the first sitting head of state to be indicted for war crimes while still in power. The charges included genocide, deportation, murder, persecutions, and extermination. Spanning 3 separate indictments for Kosovo, Croatia, and Bosnia, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague prepared for a legal marathon. The prosecution built a case covering 66 counts across 3 wars, involving over 300 witnesses and thousands of documents. The core accusation was that Milosevic sought to create a greater Serbia through brutal violence. But in court, his defense team came out swinging.
Of the Kosovo indictment, and nowhere, in no place, did I come across any mention made of the fact that everything that took place in Kosovo was done with the aim of creating a greater Serbia. That is such an absurd assertion.
And Milosevic himself, ever the skilled manipulator, chose to act as his own defense counsel. He maintained a calm, defiant composure throughout the proceedings, frequently challenging the tribunal's legitimacy and the West's role in the Yugoslav wars.
All that we heard today from the so-called prosecution only confirms that the whole concept is misconstrued. But so that you don't deprive me of the floor, I will stick to only those arguments that are in response to your question. For me, it is quite clear why this false prosecution insists on a joinder. It is a consequence of the 11th of September.
His legal strategy focused on undermining the prosecution's narrative and painting himself as a defender of his people rather than an aggressor. The defense called for a broader historical context, arguing that the conflicts were complex civil wars, not orchestrated campaigns of ethnic cleansing. The courtroom became a stage for political theater as much as legal proceedings. Milosevic repeatedly introduced conspiracy theories, attempting to link the prosecution's case to Western interference, and even referencing global events like September 11th.
They wish to place in the background the charges for Kosovo because those charges of Kosovo inevitably open up the issue of the cooperation of Clinton's administration with the terrorists in Kosovo, including the Bin Laden organization. Secondly, what we heard today shows that they too are aware that in that case they cannot avoid, regardless of the illegality of this tribunal, of the main protagonists of the crimes committed against my country and people appearing here, starting from Clinton, Albright, Clark, and others, but of course also many peace mediators whose activities and cooperation in finding peace.
Despite his combative stance, the trial moved forward. The presiding judge eventually ruled to combine the Croatia and Bosnia indictments for trial, while keeping the Kosovo charges separate.
I'm denying, as you know full well, I would reject such ideas. They simply wish to push into the background.
Milosevic, ever the nationalist, firmly asserted Kosovo's status as part of Serbia, denouncing the international presence as an illegal occupation.
Organized by foreign services from the remnants of the Albanian mafia, we set up police in Albanian villages by these villagers themselves selecting policemen who became armed, and they were Albanians, as were the postmen, as were the forestry workers, as were the other officials in the state administration. They were the target of assassinations, slaughtering, killings by Albanian terrorists. In 1998, there were more people of Albanian ethnicity that were killed by Albanian terrorists than Serbs killed by Albanian terrorists.
Then the trial became a platform for both legal argument and political messaging. The defense called for the court to consider events predating the specific indictment periods, trying to contextualize the wars as defensive actions rather than calculated aggression.
But when you come to deliberate and make your decision, I'm convinced that this trial chamber quite certainly will be interested in looking at a longer period of time, further back, and look at everything that happened in those areas of the former Yugoslavia and Croatia and Bosnia, and most especially in Kosovo.
But the evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness described systematic campaigns of violence, forced displacement, and atrocities across the former Yugoslavia. The prosecution meticulously built its case, connecting Milosevic to the chain of command and demonstrating his direct involvement in perpetrating ethnic cleansing. Throughout the proceedings, Milosevic maintained his defiant posture. He refused to acknowledge the court's legitimacy, often delivering long political speeches instead of legal arguments.
Somebody must ensure control over its own territory. But I draw your attention to another point we did not hear from the prosecution this morning, which is stated in paragraph 93 of the Kosovo indictment, where it states that this stepped-up control was done in the presence of a campaign of armed uprising and resistance to the Serb authorities. Therefore, something that does not exist anywhere, either in Croatia or in the Bosnia indictment, but it is present in the Kosovo indictment, and that is diametrically opposed.
But the court pressed on, determined to hold a head of state accountable for the horrors committed under his leadership. But Milosevic would not give in.
That is absolutely sufficient proof that this nonsense that is being alleged be absolutely rejected. I should also like to recall that at the very beginning of May 1993, thanks to our maximum efforts in Athens, the Vance-Owen plan was accepted.
Yet behind the courtroom drama, Milosevic's health was deteriorating. The stress of the trial and years of evasion took their toll. On March 11, 2006, before the court could deliver its final verdict, Milosevic was found dead in his cell from a heart attack. His sudden death robbed the victims of a formal conviction but did not erase the comprehensive record established by the trial. The proceedings had exposed the full extent of his role in Europe's worst violence since World War II. Milosevic died before he was sentenced, but at least he was indicted. Now what about a dictator who divided his own country? This is Augusto Pinochet, who faced charges of human rights violations and murder in Santiago, Chile. The tension around Chile's former dictator was electric. Outside the Grand Courthouse, media vans lined the street. Protesters and supporters alike gathered in anticipation. For years, Pinochet ruled Chile with an iron fist, leaving deep scars on the nation. A crucial legal decision was about to be announced. The previous ruling against Pinochet had been nullified due to procedural issues. This setback didn't erase the accusations. Thousands of Chileans still sought justice for the brutal abuses during his regime.
Se deja sin efecto la resolución de 1 de diciembre del 2000, corriente a focas tanto, y se declara que dicha resolución ha resultado improcedente por ahora, por no haberse cumplido la formalidad de la declaración indagatoria previa que exige el artículo 274 del Código de Procedimiento Penal.
Immediately after the announcement, chaos erupted outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed and microphones crowded around key figures. Some Chileans expressed deep disillusionment with the justice system. Decades of fighting for accountability seemed to falter, yet hope persisted. While anti-Pinochet protesters chanted for justice, his loyal supporters proudly displayed banners reading "Gracias Pinochet." The country remained deeply divided. For every demand for accountability, there was a voice defending Pinochet's legacy.
Ya de que alguna vez la justicia, que se hizo justicia en Chile, se ponga los pantalones. Ellos nos culpan a nosotros, ellos son los culpables de que lo que esté sucediendo en este país. Ellos quieren cambiar la historia. Nosotros no vamos a permitir, los pinochetistas de corazón, que nos cambien la historia. La historia es una sola y la escribimos nosotros, con nuestra verdad, con nuestros principios y nuestros valores.
Human rights activists, undeterred by the legal setback, vowed to continue their decades-long fight. Their resolve strengthened as they remembered the victims of Pinochet's regime. The struggle for justice had lasted 27 years and would not end easily.
Y seguiremos adelante como lo hemos hecho durante estos 27 años, en que la justicia nunca ha estado al lado nuestro, siempre se ha puesto al lado de quienes violaron los derechos humanos en nuestro país, pero creemos que la razón está en nuestra parte y esperamos que más adelante Pinochet sea procesado porque los delitos existen y hasta ahora nadie los ha podido refutar.
Security presence reminded everyone of the nation's turbulent history. The former dictator was not brought to justice in the end. He died before justice could be served, leaving those he had wronged disappointed. But what about a dictator ruthless with his rule and now subdued before the court? This is Jean-Claude Duvalier, charged with crimes against humanity and corruption in Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
After ignoring 3 court summonses, the former Haitian strongman Jean-Claude Duvalier finally makes it to the courtroom, under warning from a judge that he'd be jailed if he disregarded a 4th one.
The tension in the courthouse is palpable. After ignoring 3 court summonses, Haiti's former dictator, known as Baby Doc, finally appears before the bench. The courtroom is packed with victims, activists, media, and Duvalier's own supporters, each side representing decades of pain or loyalty from his brutal regime. For years, Duvalier's name was synonymous with fear in Haiti. He ruled from 1971 to 1986, inheriting power from his infamous father, Papa Doc Duvalier. Together, their regimes are responsible for thousands of deaths, disappearances, and widespread terror enforced through the notorious Tonton Macoute militia. But decades later, the core issue comes into sharp focus. After 15 years of dictatorship, Jean-Claude Duvalier is finally held to account for the crimes committed during his rule. The outcome of this hearing will determine whether he faces charges of serious human rights violations or merely financial crimes.
The courtroom was packed with media, human rights activists, and victims of the man whose name once inspired fear across Haiti.
For many Haitians, this is a chance to confront decades of impunity. For Duvalier, this is an unfamiliar side of the law he knows.
Duvalier's flight into exile in 1986 ended nearly 3 decades of dictatorship began by his father, Francois Papa Doc Duvalier.
Those days are gone, and the only thing that looms is punishment for the crimes he committed.
A lower court had ruled last year he should only face charges of alleged financial crimes, and that a statute of limitations had run out on the more serious charges.
Duvalier sits quietly, taking notes as the proceedings begin. His calm demeanor starkly contrasts with the gravity of the charges and the pain of the victims present. For these victims, the pain is all too fresh.
We're hoping that he will be there today and that he will hear what he's pretending to ignore. The crimes, the corruption, the assassinations, the disappearances, the exile, the tortures. He will hear it all.
However, outside, Duvalier's supporters gather. Some cheer, one even brandishing a human skull, symbols of the deep divisions still present in Haitian society.
But outside the court as well, scores of supporters who cheered as he emerged with his longtime companion, Veronique.
Michel Jean-Pierre, one of Duvalier's supporters, spoke.
This government has shut down the cement factories, they've shut down the flour factories. They're not doing anything positive. All that they're doing now is living off the wealth that Duvalier left behind. The free ride is about to end.
Before Duvalier could be tried and sentenced, however, he died of a heart attack.